Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Kortex Media Podcast, where we navigate the fast-paced world of automotive and more. I'm your host, Corson Schmidt. Here today, I have David Ramirez. David is a leader in the automotive aftermarket industry with a career spanning over 2 decades. David originally set out to pursue a career in law enforcement, studying administration of justice. However, his early success in wholesale distribution led him down a different path, one that has seen him excel in both warehouse and sales across the hunting, fishing, and automotive industries. Since 2004, David has made his mark in the automotive aftermarket. Known for his ability to build high-performance teams and drive companies to new heights, he's especially proud of being the inventor on the record of the Edelbrock White Stripe Filter, a testament to his innovative spirit. David's unique blend of operational and sales expertise allows him to connect the dots across business functions, helping companies avoid costly mistakes and achieve lasting success. Today, at Design Engineering, he continues to empower teams, foster growth, and bring fresh ideas to the industry. It's great to have you on, David.
Thanks for having me. Great
No
to be here.
worries. So I kind of touched on your background a little bit there, but I'll let you take the reins and let you speak about kind of how you started your career in wholesale distribution and how it transitioned into the automotive aftermarket industry.
Yeah, so my story is probably very similar to many people. I grew up in Southern California, and the motivation in the West is to, for my generation, was to go to work, get a good job, contribute to the economy, and build a decent life. So I was no different, and I guess I would say it was a high school friend of mine that said, "Hey, you need to come and work at the warehouse I work at because it's a lot of fun." And it was a family-owned company called Munson Sporting Goods, and we were a sporting goods distributor for the 11 Western states. And that started me there, and I started out as an order puller, and then eventually I was the warehouse manager. But learned every step along the way. So, and I'm a big believer in cross training and empowering people to learn as much as they can learn.
For
It makes so much more sense when people are making decisions and they know what the impact is going to be, beyond them.
sure. Yep.
So, we in the old days we called it the big picture, but in reality, in order to achieve optimal efficiency and reduce costs, we got to make every step count and try to avoid, pitfalls and mistakes that most people eventually make. So I started this family-owned sporting goods distributorship, and just grew. And eventually, I had been studying law enforcement, became newly married, had adopted 2 sons with the marriage, so I had a ready-made family.
Awesome.
So when it became time to take my law enforcement exam, which I did, and time to go into the academy, the company gave me a huge pay increase, which put me beyond what an entry level law enforcement officer would make. And I was like, okay, what do I do here? Because this is important, So I talked to a lot of law enforcement friends that I had, and they actually encouraged me. They said, you'll do better in the private sector, because even though we have great benefits and all that, it's a high risk position,
Yep.
and you would probably potentially you'll end up making more money, So that kind of solidified it for me. So I stayed there, and then it's kind of ironic. Years later, a company came in to purchase the company that I worked at because they were for sale,
Yeah.
and they wanted me to open a new warehouse for them in a nearby city. So I did that. So I went to work for a company out of Ohio that had 10 distribution points, and they were huge in the sporting goods hunting and fishing category.
Yeah.
So I did that, And that was very successful. We became, even though we were one of their smaller distribution points, with Dayton, Ohio being their largest, we began outperforming the other 9 warehouses because of efficiencies that we created. The warehouse layout, I laid it out more like a library than an automated pick facility. I remember the morning I got the call from my boss, and he said, I got all the warehouse managers calling me because, of course, I was the last one to open on the West Coast. And he said, and they see the warehouse of the week results, and there's no way that you could have beat us all. And I said, well, there's no way that I could cheat because it's all based on lines per hour and dollars.
Yeah.
So show me where I cheated. And sure enough, I didn't cheat. I had just made the place what I was more familiar with. When you got an order pick ticket in your hand in my warehouse, it would take you directly to the aisle, section, shelf, and the position on that shelf. There was no backtracking, no seesawing through. When you went through my warehouse, your order was pulled. So they ended up sending a consultant out to my warehouse to see how I did it, and then they started adopting that footprint through all of their DCs because they saw that, their standard was for an order picker to pick 30 lines an hour, which I thought was a joke. We were pulling over 100 lines an hour, which
crazy.
they thought was a lie because how can you improve so much, right?
Yeah.
But I always say in Southern California we're a little bit more how should I say, aggressive, not competitive per se, but we just move fast. So I was able to have that impact, and it worked out very well. And then eventually another Ohio company in that same industry called Buckeye Sports Supply, flew out to meet me because they wanted me to run their Reno, Nevada facility.
Yeah.
So it was an upward position for me with more money. So I interviewed and took over that facility, and did very well there. And at a point, they decided that they weren't strong enough in the West. They wanted me to come to work in their corporate facility in Canton, Ohio, offering me either the warehouse or the sales department. And that's when I made the switch and said, well, maybe I'll go into sales because I enjoy it. It's, I've always been involved in it in some form. So I came back to Ohio and took over their inside sales and telemarketing department and their export sales. And was able to, again, using the things that I had learned about selling and motivating people. That's really what it is. I mean, building a team with a common goal and just enough friendly competition to not make it ruthless,
For sure.
but fun. And we built a pretty good thing. And we had I changed their export model away from low cost items like fishing tackle and more into the higher margin stuff like actually fish baits and certain hunting accessories that you could export, even though back then we could export guns as well. But I was able to build the margin to where all of a sudden it became profitable to be in the export business. And between that and the biggest thing I did at Buckeye is all of my inside sales girls, which there was probably 3 dozen, they were just order takers. And they did well at it. And of course, they built relationships with their customers. The company came to me, the gun buyer came to me and said, hey, I've got a couple $1 million in long guns that are really dead inventory and I need to get rid of them.
Yeah.
What do you suggest? I said, well, I suggest that we give the girls money for selling them. So you give me the list, tell me what you want to sell, and then I'll put a $5 bill, a $10 bill, or a $20 bill based on the gun.
Yeah.
And we moved about $1.5 million in a month.
Holy
Now, this
cow.
was late in the year, and the motivation was these girls were going to get a check for Christmas.
Yeah.
So we're talking about people at that time that were making probably less than $10 an hour, and they were going to have an opportunity to make
To make a big
thousands of
bucks.
dollars.
Yeah.
So guess what they did? They called all of their customers that they've known, and their customers bought these guns, some whether they could sell them or not, but just to help their girl out.
That's super
So
cool.
that's where we learned, let's leverage some relationships and start selling to people rather than just, a machine.
Yeah.
And in fact, what happened then was we began to give our inside sales girls a certain amount of commission based on growth,
Yeah.
which, one of the pinnacle, not pinnacle, but one thing that always impressed me was one day when my lead girl came in and said, most of us here get up every morning and we dread driving in here. And for the first time in 8, 12, 15 years, we feel like we like coming to work. And I said, you know what? That's all I care about.
That's
Because,
yeah,
we
that's the
all have
best
to
part.
do it. We all have to do it. So heaven forbid that we should dread having to come into work.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's the lifestyle I like to give at work. I don't want this company to be your life, but I want it to be comfortable for you so you can enhance your life by what you do here.
For sure.
So to me, empowering people came easy because no one person can achieve anything by themselves. But if you can empower people below you to strive and want to do more and do better, everybody looks good. And so that's kind of been the way that I've run my career in any company that I've worked with is, first of all, identifying the weak points in an organization. And sometimes that means you got to adjust some things.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. I feel like if a person's not happy coming to work and they can't be made happy, they'll probably be happy somewhere else. And, I you'll hear me tell my people all the time, you can have a bad day. You can even have a bad week. You can't have a bad month
Yeah.
because
For sure.
we'll all pick up the slack when one of us is down, but we're not here to carry each other. We're
Yeah.
here to work together as a team and achieve, aggressive goals that we'll set for ourselves.
That's
So,
awesome.
so anyway, that's how that worked with Buckeye. In fact, I had factory reps coming to me because they would want to come in and give lessons to my girls and to sell their product.
Yeah.
And I had factory reps coming to me and saying, your competitors are on me because in one case you've sold so many gun cases because you ran a spiff and your girls made money that the dealers are all saturated. They can't buy any more gun cases. So now I'm in trouble over at this distributor. And I'm like, well, we're all here to satisfy the customer. Whoever does it best, right?
Yeah.
So that went well for a long time. And then I had an opportunity to go back to California because I was in Canada at that time. And the company Maglite, which is the aluminum flashlight company, who I had met early in my career at the first sporting goods company because they were just starting out. And
Yeah.
they came and toured our building and didn't know much about warehouses, didn't know what a pallet jack was. Anyway, a buyer that I knew, at the first company, he became the vice president of sales. And he said, hey, I called him and said, hey, do you know anybody out west that's looking for anything? And he said, we're looking for something. Why don't you come to work for us? I said, well, you've said that before, but you've never really, So anyway, I went in and flew down at Thanksgiving to meet with family and then have this interview. And I got home and there was an offer for me. And that was a bigger deal because at that point, they had about 800 employees. And they were a manufacturer, obviously.
Yeah.
So I went in to manage all of their inventory. They had 13 facilities in Ontario, California. So I was there to manage all of that, including the receiving and the receiving aspect, stocking, and then supplying all of the. I was supplying all of the manufacturing lines, up to and including the anodizing. Sending the parts out for anodizing and then receiving them back in and going through all the operations. So I became their master planner, and I really enjoyed that job. I enjoyed the people. but I'll be honest, the culture of the top of the company wasn't one that was conducive with me. So I had a freight rep come in to meet with me, and she said, there's a company around the corner that does automotive stuff, and they're looking for a warehouse manager. Would you be interested? I said, I'm always interested in an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
So she gave me the contact. I sent the guy my resume. I followed up the next day and said, hey, I sent you a resume. Just want to make sure you get it. And he said, oh, man. He says, I haven't looked at it yet. He said, but we just made an offer to somebody. And I said, okay, well, when you get it, just dispose of it. And he said, no, I won't throw it away. I'll keep it,
Yeah.
just in case, we see something down the line. I said, okay, hey, have a happy Thanksgiving. He called me back the next day and said, hey, we've changed our mind. Can you come in for an interview? And I said, well, what do you mean? You made an offer. He said, I know, but now we saw your resume and the owner wants to meet with you.
Take you on.
Long story short, I went in. It was funny because the day I went in, the company was called Spectre Performance, and they were automotive, and they were big into the chain stores, but all of their product was imported from China. Okay. So they did a lot of chrome dress up, a lot of accessories, throttle brackets, and even a line of gaskets and stuff. But the owner lived in Northern California, and he flew down to Ontario every day.
That's crazy.
Well, the day I scheduled for my interview, his wife had a gallbladder attack, and he had to fly home. So I go in there at 2:00, and they said, unfortunately, the owner had to. But what we would like you to do is interview with all of our managers. And I thought, wow, that's different.
Yeah.
So met with all of their managers, interviewed. It was funny because I could tell there was a couple that were like not understanding why we were hiring the position that we were hiring, and so I thought, okay, so there's a little bit of a mix, not conflict, but some opinion here. So got done with the interview, which ran like almost 2 hours.
That's crazy.
The COO sent me to the HR lady's office, and he went in to meet with his managers to see what they thought because he was not in the interview.
Yeah.
And then he came back in with me and the HR manager, and he said, well, what did you think? And I said, you've got a good group of people there. Some aren't too sharp, but a good group. And he started laughing. He goes, did you just say that? I said, if you don't have a sense of humor, because I have a sense of humor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
you got to laugh. But anyway, they hired up. It was much more money than they were going to pay.
Yeah.
But they decided that, maybe we hire up and start building this thing because they were on a good trajectory. So I eventually met the owner. We got along very well. And then I started giving input. Well, first of all, the way their house was laid out, it was not at all conducive to aggressive order pulling. And I'll give you a quick anecdote. So they would get the chain store orders they were pretty good at because everything was case pack.
Yeah.
But the large number of wholesale distributors, mail order like Jegs and Summit, and some of these other distributors, they were not case pack. So they laid their warehouse out with quick pick, what I call quick pick, and then bulk pick, which is case pack. When they laid out the quick pick side of the building, they did not organize anything in any certain order. It was just on the shelf. So it literally could take 2 days to pull an order. And I was just flabbergasted. I thought, how can you do that?
Yeah.
So I went to the IT guy. I knew they were running on an AS400, which I had had worked with before.
Yeah.
And it said, I need these tickets sorted by part number. The bulk part can stay sorted by bin location, but I'm putting all these part numbers in part number order from the beginning to the end, and I want the pick ticket to sort by that. And he said, yeah, that's easy to do. Then all of a sudden, They could pull an order in an hour. I kid you not. And they were like, what happened? And I said, it's funny, but nobody has proven to me that basic layout of a library per se is it can be beat unless you
Yeah.
totally automate. If
And
humans are going to pick it, they need to know where things are, and they can't be going back and forth.
for sure. And
So
you're speaking like it was most of these warehouses that had the same issue. They just didn't organize their stuff. But
they
as soon as
didn't.
you
In
came
fact,
in,
I've consulted to locations, and first thing I do is I walk in and I say, I need to see your pick ticket.
yeah,
And I'll look at their pick ticket and I'll say, somebody from IT designed this who never pulled an order, right? And they'll say, well, yeah, but what's wrong with it? And I said, if you're going to build a pick ticket, it needs to have three things. It needs to have information for the puller, information for the checker, and information for the accounting department that's going to create an invoice out of that. Nobody needs to be looking at the whole thing.
yeah,
So you may even have some columns that are redundant. Like, here's a good example. Line number. I put line number on both sides because the order puller is going to pull by the line number and then the part number. Okay. But their location is more important to them. The accounting person is going to input that into an invoice and they need the line number too. Don't make them look all the way over to the left again. Put it right by the quantity that's being shipped. So it made people think that's kind of weird, but I could look at a location and say, I can increase your output by 30% just by looking
crazy.
at what they were and then how their places were marked.
Yeah.
Because it would be like, how does someone know how to get there? Well, they just know. Okay, that doesn't work. If you can't hand your pick ticket, pull a stranger off the street. If you can't give him your pick ticket and tell him, take me to this part number. And if he can't see the aisle, which is clearly marked,
yeah,
the section, which is clearly marked, the shelf, which is clearly marked, and then the part number on the shelf, then you're not doing it right. So it seems basic. I was taught that early on, at
Yeah.
the very first warehouse I worked at. And that seems to be something that a lot of people miss. It was amazing to me. When I went to work at Maglite, they had no bin locations. They had no bin
crazy.
locations. And the reason was their IT guy was an old IBMer, and he said, well, if I make locations, then I'm going to have to keep up on them if they change. And I'm like, okay. So for one guy, we're going to make 100 people walk up and down the aisles looking up and down. And that's
Yeah.
literally, because I said, how do you find anything in this aisle? Oh, this is JJ's aisle. He knows where everything is. What if he's sick? Well, Albert's his backup. What if he gets hit by a car? Well, then we just have to look.
that's crazy.
So anyway, so that got me into automotive at Spectre Performance. And we had, one of the things that we had at Spectre was we had a very successful aftermarket cone filter for open intake systems. And we did a lot of intake stuff. And I raised the question, as the new guy in the automotive industry is, this material that we're using on these filters is very, very good. Why can't we make it into a panel filter and compete with K&N?
Yeah,
And of course, I was told you can't compete with K&N because they're the boss of that market.
yeah,
And my input was, but here's the thing: I don't want to compete with K&N. I want to compete with Fram Paper.
yeah,
So what do you mean? So well, that's 100 million customers. A Fram Paper guy will pay $12 for a filter. He's not going to jump up to a $42 filter at K&N. But guess
Yeah.
what? I can make this filter and sell it for $20. And it's a lifetime pre-oiled filter. He won't jump to triple the price of his purchase, but if he doubles it and says he has a lifetime filter, that's an untapped market.
for sure.
So I finally convinced them that it was worth a try. And here was the beauty of it. I said, look, let's take the top 50 numbers. We don't need 1,000 numbers like K&N has because, the 80-20 rule, most of those are just there and you're not going to turn them very often. Let's cherry pick. We can because we're small. Who cares? We'll
Yeah.
cherry pick. We'll do the top things. And then in a situation where K&N will sell you 3 filters, it's the same filter, but one's for a GM, one's for a Chevy Silverado, one's for a GMC, and one's for a Cadillac.
Yeah.
Same filter, but they're three different prices. Great marketing on their point, by the way. But if you're a company like we were, and you say, hey, we're going to be honest with our customers, we're going to charge you more for the same thing, right? So we launched that program. I was challenged by the owner because I kept running my mouth about sales, to be honest. And he said, I need you running sales. Why don't you do the non-chain business instead of what you're doing now? So I said, okay. So I took that over. And he challenged me because I said I was going to get our filters into a wholesale distributor. And I was going to lift K&N. He said it's never going to happen. So I did that on my first trip to the East Coast, going up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I found a small family chain of stores. And I convinced him, I'm telling you, because he said, I make great margin on K&N. I said, you do make great margin, but you don't make great money because you don't sell any of them. I'm showing you I can give you great turns with lower margin. And at the end of the day, we don't write checks with margin, right? We write it with money. And he saw my numbers, and there we'd had our first K&N lift and loaded him up. The problem was we got too much into K&N's business, and they came after us for some what they called false advertising.
Okay.
So it ended up in a huge lawsuit, and eventually Spectre lost, and they had to and K&N bought them basically out of bankruptcy. So I left there and was going to figure out what do I want to do next. And then the folks at Edelbrock reached out to me.
You?
And I didn't answer their emails. I mean, I wasn't working, but I wasn't going to move to Torrance or drive to Torrance. If you know anything about California, I was just north of San Diego, and they were kind of in the South Bay area of LA.
Yeah.
And so I had a friend of mine call and say, hey, Edelbrock tells me they keep reaching out to you. I said, yeah, I'm not going to go to Torrance. And he said, dude, talk to them, please. Maybe they won't make you go to Torrance. So anyway, I reached out to them, and they said, hey, they had a foundry that was not far from my house where they poured all of their aluminum and stuff.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, we got empty offices over there. We'll put you in an office there. We'll put you in an office in your house. Because at that point, nobody knew who was going to take up the Spectre stuff that was in all the chain stores, the made in China stuff. So they said, we want to bring you on and see if we can get that market. Now, Edelbrock already had stuff that was being made in China, but they didn't have all of the little accessories and stuff that Spectre had. So they asked me if I could put together like a plan, maybe even a 5-year plan on what I would do to ease them into this product. And so I did that. Overnight, I worked on a plan, sent it to them before I went to bed. The next morning, they called me and said, we didn't expect, number one, this, and we didn't expect it so fast. So I went in and interviewed. They hired me. And I was going to work from home, work from the foundry, and then once in a while, I would go into Torrance.
Yeah.
So that's where it got interesting. Edelbrock at that point had been 42% of them had been purchased by an investment group because Vic was getting older. He had, 3 daughters, and the company had gone to a pinnacle, and then they were starting to fall down a little bit, basically. So the second day I was there, the guys from Chicago came in from the group, and Vic and Nancy and the one daughter that was active in the company, we had a meeting. So they asked me about, my plans to take over this business. And I said, you guys, if you really want to cherry pick the best stuff that Spectre had, you got to get these cone filters because that's about $10 million a year of their business. And
Crazy.
I know the factory. We could pick up without missing a beat. And the funny thing was, they said, wow, we never even thought about that. And, Vic said, I don't know if we can sell filters. I said, oh, you can sell filters. If I put your name on that and you're competing, with lower names or no names, you'll be able to sell these filters. I mean, you sell, turbochargers, you sell all these high-grade engines and all these, manifolds and stuff. And then ironically, I'm sitting at this table with a yellow legal tablet, and I said, so here's what I would do. After we launch the cone filter line and we get in all the chains, then we'll come out with an improved version. And I pulled this out of the air. And they said, well, what would that be? And I said, well, I drew a filter. I said, we'll take two of the ribs and we'll have them white instead of red, green, or red, blue, or black.
Yep.
Okay. And we'll put your badge right on there. And what we'll say is this is Clean Stripe. You market it, Clean Stripe technology, whatever. That will show dirt faster than black, blue, or red.
Yeah.
So we'll tell them as soon as this white starts turning, it's time to recharge the filter, clean it and recharge, and we sell an oil and cleaner kit.
That's cool.
So they thought, yeah, especially the guys that weren't in the automotive industry, they thought, yeah, that's And so I get back to my office, and the president calls me and says, Vic wants to do that filter first. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, that whole white stripe thing you did. And I said, John, I haven't even talked to the factory about this. I don't even know if they can do it.
Yeah.
And he said, well, can you call them? Well, of course, their time is different than ours. And I said, okay. I said, let me see what I can do. So I reached out to the factory, and praise God, they said, yeah, we can do that. And I said, how fast can I get a sample?
Yeah.
And within a week, I had an air freight sample with the Edelbrock logo on the badge and the white stripe.
That's super cool.
And they were like, okay, we got to get a patent. So they said, you deal with our patent attorneys. You design this thing. You tell them what you want. Make sure that nobody's got anything like it. And they didn't. And I did. And so we launched the product. I couldn't get their sales guys to they embraced it. They liked it, but they were having trouble getting it into a chain. I had good relationships with the AutoZone Mexico buyers from previous experience. So I reached out to them and said, hey, you guys got to put these in. You'll be the first ones to have them. So that launched it into the chain stores. Now you can find it on Walmart and Amazon and everywhere else. But that got that going. With them, I was Edelbrock's international product manager. So I made a couple trips to China to visit the factories, to make sure that they were compliant with the California Supply Chain Act, which means you can't lock your employees behind chain link. You have to let them go to the bathroom. No kids in the labor force, So, so I did that. It was great. It was great. I mean, I'm not fond of the Chinese government, but I like the Chinese people. They have good work ethic, and they're very loyal people. I still work with them today. But so that got me there, and so I did that for a few years, and then they started to kind of restructure a little bit, and I had other people asking me, "Hey, could you come to work for us?"
That's crazy.
Including some very rich Chinese people that had operations here, and they wanted me to work for them. So then I kind of bounced from one to the other. And then when I decided, the Southern California lifestyle is too expensive, I'm sick of being in traffic.
Yep.
My wife and I agreed to start looking around. And at the SEMA show, I walked into the DEI booth, and I said, I saw a while ago you guys were looking for an operations VP. And they said, yeah, we had a guy, but he lasted about a day. And so anyway, I started conversations with the owner of this company on the phone. He basically hired me on the phone.
Yeah.
And then I moved and came back here. And since I've been here, we've grown. We've added to the building. We've added to manufacturing. And we're on a good trajectory. And it's my same recipe with, being people wanting to come to work rather than dreading coming to work. So, and that's good because the Markley family wants a family style atmosphere in their company. So, we come to work. It's in our mission statement. We're here to have fun, make money, go home happy.
That's
So
awesome.
that's what I like. That's what I do, and it seems to be pretty successful so far.
That's
But
awesome.
it's certainly not me. It's
Yeah.
all the people that have been willing to work and work with and alongside. And throughout my whole life, I know and I tell people, we're going to build you, and eventually we're not going to have enough for you. You're gonna want to go somewhere else,
Yeah.
but you're going to get to take everything you have with you. And to me, an employee that's learning and growing the whole time you have them is the best asset you can have, even though you know you're going to lose them, because it's all about people, our customers and us. So it's funny because, I always felt like at Maglite, the attitude was, they can take my people as long as I have my machines I can rebuild. My motto is they can copy our parts, but they can't copy our people, and
For
that's
sure.
one of our core beliefs here at DEI.
That's awesome. You have
So
such an amazing upcoming story. Like, just your relationships with people helped you excel so much quicker. And then, like you said, you want all of your employees learning, and that's exactly what you did. You had those people in place helping you at every step, like your first warehouse you worked at. They taught you how to organize everything, move things
yes,
forward, and that was huge to your journey and what you've brought so far, because it just created those relationships. And once you had those relationships, they kept building. And every step you took, you had those relationships still to
yes,
make everything work
absolutely.
out. That's
Yeah.
super. That's super cool.
If anybody in almost every industry, if they don't believe that they're in the people business, they're in the wrong business,
Yeah,
because it's absolutely all about people. I mean,
for
we don't
sure.
do anything without it. And we embrace technology for sure. I brought ERP to DEI because we were on QuickBooks when I got here.
Yeah,
But boy, has that been such a success for us. And when I mean that, I mean individual growth among our people, who very few of them even knew what ERP was when I came here. And now we've got people that are so versed at what they're doing. We're barcode scanning. We're like Amazon. When we ship your order, you're going to get an email with a link to track it. You're going to get notified when it gets delivered.
yeah,
And our industry is the slowest on keeping up with that type of technology,
for
but
sure.
it's relatively cheap, and it impresses the heck out of people when they realize, wow, I just got an email that my DEI order shipped.
Yeah,
It's the little things like that. But behind that, what's the benefit for us? Well, our phones don't ring as much, because what's your most common call? Where's my order?
yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
and you got to have people on the phones to answer that question.
Yeah,
So you inadvertently create efficiencies while you improve your customer service and your customer experience. So yeah, it's been a
so
great
smart.
run, and I think that we've done some great things. Like I said, I've consulted a couple times, and it's kind of fun for me. I could probably
Yeah,
see myself doing that after retirement, just because the positive impact is so great, and,
for
and,
sure.
and I mean, it's literally money in the bank.
Yeah, and you see the results. That's got to be
Yes,
huge as well, right? Like,
absolutely,
to take a
absolutely. The
company
results
from
are
being small to growing like you did with a lot of the companies that you've worked with is probably the
absolutely,
best feeling in the world.
yep, and not being afraid to approach the giants.
Yeah,
Don't be afraid to go to Holly. Don't be afraid to go to these huge corporations and say, "Hey, we have something we can offer you," because because there's always something. There's always some little niche
yeah,
that they're not seeing, and you know, when you live in a forest, you don't see the trees. And so when you walk into a place and you say, "Why do you guys do this?" You never want to say, "Well, that's how we've always done it," because
yeah,
that speaks of zero ingenuity and zero creativity to say, "Hey, how can we possibly do this better?"
for sure.
The very first company I worked for, we formed a little committee we called E4I, and it was Employees for Improvement. And what we did was we drew people in from every department, including order pullers and packers and checkers, and we met once a month and said, "What can we do to make your job easier?" And that was the first glimpse for me, to see that every action causes a reaction, and that if if you operate like that and you think like that, you're gonna skip a lot of the mistakes, or worse than that, the bad habits that people and companies get into because that's how they've always done it.
Yeah.
So that kind of has built the core of what I believe is the way to be successful.
That's super cool. You have so much knowledge. It's crazy. And I'm so glad that I have you here speaking on it and just teaching people. Because a lot of people don't like to give away their knowledge. And I think the past few years it's been huge, and people have been teaching others and wanting to spread their knowledge. But, and doing consultations and mentorships. And I think it's huge that you're saying this information on the podcast, because I think a lot of people are going to get some huge insights from you. Not even as a warehouse, but even automotive. If you're in any company, you can take this information and
Absolutely,
and
it
add it
works
to
everywhere.
anything, for sure.
Yeah, fill in the blank, because
Yeah.
if your organization has people, then you need to think this way.
Yeah.
You just do. I have two sons, and obviously they're adults and well on their way, and I'm proud of their work ethic as well. They try to give me credit, but I refuse to take credit because they did what they did.
Yeah.
But they know too. They know that the key to any successful operation is going to be the relationship with the people there and with their customers.
For sure.
Inventory is money, and when you go into my warehouse, it's going to look really clean, because even I had the owner of the first company I worked for. He walked out to warehouse, and there was a fishing lure on the floor.
Yeah.
And he said, "Dave, what's that?" And I said, "Well, that's a Mets, black spinner with a yellow tail." And he goes, "No, that's $5." And I said, "You're right, it is." So
That's super cool.
you keep it clean. You keep it in the bin. You take good care of your inventory, because it's money. It's not just something, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see me do the same thing. I'll say, what is that? Oh, it's a blah blah. No, it's about $25.
That's funny.
So,
That's awesome.
if
It's
it
true
were
though.
$25, you would want it up on the shelf, and
Yeah.
you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be. I refuse to be a dictator. I can't do it.
Yeah.
But you can make it fun, and then once they think that way, they always think that way.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's about creating mindsets that are common sense, not hard to sell, because it's very it makes a lot of sense. So just kind of the way that I've kind of done things and learned how to do things. So
And it's amazing, because you've taught a lot of people, and I bet you you've gave a bunch of knowledge to your employees as well, and that's the biggest thing. You said you like to cross train your employees.
yes,
And that's huge, because they get a little taste of everything, like you
Yes.
like you were given in your upcoming as well, and that's
Right.
the most important thing.
People think that originally cross training was a way to be able to cover spots if someone was missing, right? And that certainly is the functional value of it. But the hidden value is they get to know how what they do affects this position, and how what this position does affects them.
Yeah.
And that's a bigger aha moment. That all of a sudden tells the order puller, okay, when I'm pulling this order, I'm not going to scatter one part number in 3 totes, because that
Yeah.
poor checker that's going to follow me, they're going to want to see it all together, right? That packer is going to want to put it all together. And it's just a little click. You didn't even have to verbalize it. They just lived it and said, okay, if I were a packer, I wouldn't want me pulling my orders, because it's like goulash.
For sure.
And it needs to be, and then, so what happens there? Then all of a sudden your efficiencies increase. All of a sudden you're checking faster, you're packing faster. So it's kind of funny. I look at it as common sense. People ask me, are you familiar with are you a black belt, or are you familiar with all these efficiency methods? And I'm like,
yeah.
dude, it's like common sense. I was raised on common sense. We were told, the Japanese called it quality circles way back when, which was physically just saying, hey, if this is your work area, what do you use the most?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, then have that here. What do you use the least? And then have it back there. I'll give you a great example. I was at an ice cream parlor, ordered hot fudge sundae. Noticed that the hot fudge was at the far back of their counter, and they were all,
Reaching
so I said,
over.
pulled the manager over. I said, what's your most popular topping? Oh, hot fudge by far. Why isn't it at the front of the counter? What do you mean? I
Yeah.
said, well, you got the butterscotch up here, and you got the hot fudge, and your grills are extending themselves. And it was like, oh, geez, why didn't I think of that? It was an easy move, but guess what? I'll bet the girls were happy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and a lot of business owners, they don't, when they're working for their own company and they're inside internally, they never step back to look at the big picture and actually look at the little things they can change to make a huge difference. And that's where you came into a lot of companies and actually took that approach from a distance, and you could see things that they never saw, because that's just how it's always been, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you're in the forest, you can't see the trees.
Yeah,
And likewise, I learned early that I wanted to know every position that I managed, I wanted to know what that entailed.
for sure.
So, and here's the reason. I wanted to be able to give those people the proper credit that they deserve if I knew the degree of difficulty of their job, right? If I don't know the degree of difficulty, how can I give them an honest assessment and say, you do a really good job or you do a really poor job if I don't know what their job is?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. They laugh at me at DEI because it's not uncommon to see me go out and start packing orders if they need the help, or pulling orders, or whatever it is. I mean, I kind of like to be busy anyway, but I also
Sure.
like to let people know that I'm not asking them to do anything that I wouldn't do. We're all here. We all want the same thing. Let's just have fun and do it. And that also catches me up if there's any little intricacies or something that we're missing, or anything that we're causing ourselves grief on. I go and live it a little bit and say, okay, now I see there's something here that kind of slipped through.
Yeah.
Let's get this tuned up. But yeah, that's kind of who I am. That's kind of how I like to manage.
And it seems like it's been working for the time you've been
I
in
would say so.
distribution, for sure.
I would say so. Yeah.
And I think that's a aspect that's never going to really step out of it. That's always going to be part, unless we get robots start taking over the distribution. But you still need the organization, because they're
That's
not going to
right.
know where everything is either. So
That's right. Yeah, someone's got to know how to program them,
yeah, exactly.
right? Yeah, because even if they're robots, we want them to be efficient. We don't want them going back and forth over their trail.
Yeah, I know, for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I guess we'll do this. So just to tell the audience a little bit more about DEI, what do you guys do at DEI? What do you guys sell? What do you guys offer?
So DEI, we're in a little niche part of the automotive aftermarket of what we call heat and sound. So their first big launch of product was their exhaust wrap for wrapping headers.
Yep.
We've got an exhaust wrap where lava rock is literally crushed, pressed, and then made into threads,
Yeah.
and then it's woven into a basalt tape
Right.
that is much better at protecting against heat. But then we've gone further into, okay, so if it gets hot, we know how to fix it. What if it's too noisy? Okay, well, we have an array of textiles and materials that can quiet down noise, can stop rattles. When I came here, they had a Atom flash cutter on order from Italy, and that was going to be our first big CNC machine. And the owner said, "Man, I just want to make sure we're not buying a big paperweight." So
Yeah.
we got it in, we got it set up. We trained people here how to run it with no previous experience, and we simply started cutting some of the stuff that we were paying to have cut. It became so successful that within a year we said we need another cutter. We need another CNC machine, but our product development guy said, let's not go with this blade and a router bit anymore. Let's go with water.
Yeah.
So we bought our first water jet,
Yeah.
and then we couldn't keep up with that, so we bought a second water jet. So now we have 3 CNC machines. We cut foam and fabric and even light metal with water.
They're
it's-
super cool machines.
A million times faster
They're
than a
amazing.
blade, and
Yeah.
it's much cleaner. So yeah, our efficiencies there have just gone through the roof, as well as our capabilities. So now we do some Jeep kit sound deadening Jeep kits for the top of
Yeah.
all your Jeeps. We offer different textures and whatnot, and they're very successful. And now we're doing other things. We're cutting not even just for automotive. We've got outside companies that say, hey, we need this. Do you have a material that will work? And can you cut it? And we say,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll do that. And so we get a little bit of side business here on manufacturing for other people when we have machine availability.
Cool.
So there's really only a couple of us in this little niche category. We're considered the premium
Yeah.
because we're in all the chains now. And when we moved into AutoZone, we pulled our competitor from AutoZone, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
You got to give up. You got to take something to give something in the chain stores. To be able to pull
sure.
your competitor is like the icing on the cake. So we're in all the chains. We're in all the wholesale distributors, some small chains, and we're continuing to grow. Amazon's a big business for us.
Yeah. I actually have some of your heat wrap, and I'm pretty sure I got it off
good.
Amazon for one of my project cars. I bought one. I bought some too. It was the Velcro heat wrap. So that's
Yeah.
like when I saw your logo after when I found you guys. I'm like, I've seen this before, and then it all connected that it was the heat wrap once I looked into it. That's so funny.
Yeah, yeah. So and we do well. I mean, the thing that impresses me about DEI, to be honest, after being everywhere else that I've been, which have been some pretty big names,
Yeah.
is our defective rate is almost non-existent. It's less than 1%.
That's crazy.
And I tell you, I've been to companies where the return department was as big as the shipping department,
Yeah.
and those are a nightmare. But yeah, we have negligible defective product. So I'm proud of that
awesome.
because it
Yeah.
speaks to the value of the product.
For sure.
But yeah, that's what we do, and we've got a speaker baffle line for people that want to kill the reverberation noise from their speakers and get true sound.
Yeah.
We've talked about taking that into the home market because home theaters are a thing now.
Yeah.
And there's other areas we could go. We just we're small enough to be nimble and flexible that we can really bring something from the drawing board to production in less than a month.
Yeah. That's super cool.
Yeah, which that was the other thing about that whole white stripe filter. I went from that sample that I got, and within 4 months, I had a container full of filters being unloaded at our dock.
Yeah.
Nothing ever happens that fast.
No, that's
So, but I have
That's
good
awesome.
relationships in China, so we're able to get a lot of things done.
No, for sure. And relationships definitely helped you out through your journey. You kind of spoke on certain aspects where you guys could go in any direction with DEI. What are some of those directions that you want to head in the next kind of 6 months to a year?
We think that there's an opportunity in some of the marine market. We think that there's an opportunity in some of the home
Yeah.
improvement market. We've launched a line of coatings that are sound and heat resilient. One of them we call ATAC, acoustic thermal coating,
Coating, yeah.
ATAC. We launched it as a gallon with you can buy a sprayer to put on your compressor and spray it. But actually, I'm going over after this, and they're putting it into aerosol cans for us. So we'll have a
Super cool.
consumer product of ATAC. ATAC's done very well. Imagine a consumer being able to go buy a can of undercoating that will deaden sound and reduce heat.
Yeah.
And it's a water-based. It's not
Not
petroleum-based.
oil-based. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about that. And that's been a journey for us here because we've never done anything like that. So,
For sure.
So yeah. So I think the hardware industry, even some industrial, we do some industrial now. We do crazy things like a company that sells the the motors that raise and lower theater curtains, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
noisy. So we built a product that encloses them. Now we'll only sell, maybe we sell 100 of those a year. But they came to us and said, "You guys are the pros in sound. How can we make this thing quiet?"
That's
So,
awesome.
It's almost nothing that we won't try.
Yeah.
And at this point, we either have or definitely have access to materials that are suitable for anything. If it's decibel, if it's R rating, we can probably pull something out of our bag of tricks or have something made. We've
Yeah,
actually designed some stuff ourselves that now sells very well in the RV industry, which is another industry that we just got into a couple of years ago, and that seems to be growing exponentially.
for sure. And that's huge because a lot of the RVs or even camping trailers that you see, they're not great built, and the walls
No,
are paper thin. So
no,
it does not they don't keep any sound out at all.
no. They want, unfortunately, that industry wants everything done as close to free as they can get it.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes a challenge. But when your quality is well known and the proof is right there, because you can put a thermometer on it, you can put a decibel reader on it, and you
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I just took you down 20 decibels." What can you say about that? I mean, that's
Yeah.
something that you can sell. I mean,
For
that's
sure.
to us in the automotive industry. We always say if you can't feel it at the pedal, it's not really performance,
Yeah.
right?
For-
So
It's true.
same thing. If you can't hear the improvement, then you didn't really improve it.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, so we're looking at those options as they present themselves.
That's awesome. No, that's you guys can really go in any direction, and you guys aren't a new industry or a new company by any means. You guys have been
Now
in the game
this is our
for
30th year. This
yeah.
is our
So
30th year. We're proud of that.
and
Yep.
that's super amazing because you guys can still go in any direction. And you guys have been around for so long. You've built a great name for yourself, and
Yeah, they have.
I'm excited to see where the future comes for you guys.
Yeah.
But looking
Absolutely.
back on your journey, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned, and what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs wanting to come into either the distribution side of things or automotive companies, aftermarket automotive companies as well?
So the good thing about automotive aftermarket is the when we grow best is when people keep their cars longer. Okay. So I think we're up to 12 years now. When I started in this industry, it was like 7 years, and then people sold their car. The longer that goes, that's what AutoZone and Advance and O'Reilly, that's what they look at. They look at vehicle retention. And in the current climate, people are just keeping their cars longer. And that speaks well certainly for the guys with the brake pads and rotating electrics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it also does well for us because that car's now 12 years old. It didn't have the acoustic technology that we have now,
Yeah.
or certain things wear out, or the manufacturer put kind of like inferior components in it because they're trying to keep a price, right?
Yeah.
So we say now, hey, take your door panels off. We've got a liner now that includes insulation, a thin metal, and an adhesive. Pull that plastic that you have off there now. This is pre-cut. Stick it on. Put that door panel back on. Also, when you slam that door, it's going to sound like a new car.
For sure.
So,
That's
so I would say in the automotive aftermarket, don't forget there's still a ton of customer opportunities out there that can be approached, but you have to understand that, especially in a company that creates remedies for things, most of your customers are a one-time customer
yeah.
because they're only going to have that problem once, right? But they're going to, if you impress them enough, they're going to tell 10 of their friends.
And they're going to remember for the next vehicle.
Exactly. And the more you can impress them with a result, the more people they're going to tell. Because we're guys and we like to brag about our cars and our toys.
Yeah.
Sometimes we like to keep things secret, but when it's too earth-shattering, we're going to brag about it. So
For sure.
all of a sudden you're telling your friends, look, I put this on my GMC, and all of a sudden my doors are so quiet, I can't believe it. So I would say in anything that you do, remember that it's a person you're working for and it's people that are working with. Okay. Never get rid of the people element. Or entrepreneurs starting out, I would say most of the managers you will have over your time will not be fit to be managers. And that's nothing bad. It's not bad. But you have to be flexible enough and understand that some people have the gift of being able to lead others and some don't.
Yeah.
And you just have to make that right, because you can't afford to fail because you've got someone in the wrong spot. You just, it's too valuable. And I've been many places where I see, they got promoted because of longevity. That's the worst recipe ever.
Yeah.
If you're promoted by success, then you see a successful operation. Okay. I'll never forget a conversation that I had with Tony Maglica, who was the founder of Maglite. He's a Croatian guy, very, very old school. And, he said, I like you, I like your work, but your people like you, and that's not good. And I was like, what? No, he was of the mind that if your people liked you, then you weren't a good manager. If they hated you, you were a good manager because you were a dictator.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to carry that mantle, and I never will. It's not successful. But, yeah. So for people starting out, keep your eyes open. Look for good talent. Create good talent. Let people make mistakes. Encourage people to think, and take input from everybody. I don't care if it's the guy sweeping the floors. If they see something and they say something, if you encourage that open communication, you'll be amazed at what you'll find.
Definitely. No, that's some great advice. This whole podcast has been full of great advice for anyone who's going to be listening to it. I just have one final question. Where can people find DEI? Where can people find you? Social media website?
So, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. DEI, you can find us at designengineering.com. And I'm sure that even through that you could find me, but definitely you can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. That was great. Just your story and your upcoming, your experience that you have in every aspect of every industry, from sales to distribution to even your entrepreneur mind of creating product, is unreal. And I'm so glad that you came on to.
I'm honored that you feel that way, to be honest. I never think of myself that way. But I'm always willing to give advice. Hopefully I didn't run on too long, but it's been a great journey. I've enjoyed it. I look forward to every day that I come to work. That's awesome. And I'm glad when someone else tells me they do as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the biggest thing. You don't want to wake up and go somewhere that you don't want to be. Like you said, you got your girls selling things, and they were super happy to come make money and sell things. And it changes the lives of people for sure.
It really does.
What you're doing.
It's transformational. There's just no doubt it's transformational.
For sure.
And that's what you want.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want and if you keep your like you said, you're not a dictator. You want to make sure everyone's happy in the workplace. If everyone's happy, everyone's going to be moving together. Everyone's going to be helping each other out instead of everyone miserable. No one's happy to be there. The days drag on, and you're probably looking for new team members quite often.
Yep. We've grown well, and we've got some great people. And the other thing, another line that I use quite often is, because sometimes I can be a little aggressive, is you got to have friction to get traction, right? So, we have to keep on ourselves and within our organization to keep the wheels rolling. Okay? We've been good at that. We've got good people. We don't do a lot of meetings. Our meetings are short and concise.
Yeah.
And we don't, thank God, we don't talk about the same things every week, because that's a waste of time. So
for sure.
The book to read would be Death by Meeting, and that's a good analogy of what you don't want to fall into.
Awesome. Is there any other books that you've read that are super amazing that have been big impact?
I've read a lot. I've read a lot of books.
I bet.
Read a lot of books, and I'll pass them on to my managers if I think it is a good, if the advice is sound.
Yeah.
Trying to think.
Good.
Great Teams by Don Yeager is a good book. Again, Death by Meeting. That's every manager should read that.
Yeah.
Everybody that hosts a meeting has to, and it's a short read, but it makes very logical sense.
Okay. Perfect.
Other than that, I constantly look for ways to what's the newest thing, and you know what? It always boils back down to the same thing: do things right, do them smart, and treat people like people.
For sure.
And then you don't have the elephant to eat. You can, eat it a bite at a time. So
For sure. No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
thanks for having me.